Hey everybody, I'm here with my lovely friend Sara Priestley, who so many of you know, who is probably the person more than anyone who gets quoted on the courses that I run and who gets read out on webinars. And so I'm so glad to have you here, my darling. Thank you for being here. And the main reason that I thought of Sarah for wonderful words, well, not least because she's so associated with wonderful words, but specifically on a small group call we had on our little reset group after all of the time together that we'd had, very intense course. On our last webinar, the last person to speak, and I'd asked everyone to bring some words or some music or art or something that really had deeply inspired them that they'd like to give as a gift to the other 11 people in the group. And so the last person to speak read out some words from Sarah, and it was such a goosebump moment. It was very precious, and I felt so grateful that we had those words to end what had been a very amazing time with these people. And so I've asked Sarah to bring them and to read them out for us all, to give us the gift, all of us, the gift of it. And before we did that, I'd just love to hear from you, darling. Maybe what has led to those words, perhaps what you've seen or what you've experienced, and anything that you think you'd like to share with us before we hear them.
First of all, I'm always kind of surprised and almost a little bit embarrassed when I hear that people have read out things I wrote, because I think so much, and probably for you as well, the writing is my process. And social media has sort of been like we used to call it the bit bucket, where you just put things because you've got to put them somewhere. And it took me a long time to accept that people read what I wrote and that they in some ways identified with it. But those stories particularly, and there's still only about 10 of them because I never know when I'm going to write them. They're very I don't plan them. They kind of happen. And when I've written them, I am bored by them. Honestly, every single one of them, I read them back and I'm like, and John went for a walk. Well, that's exciting, isn't it? Is the level that they seem to me. So I always have to take a step back. And then I kind of share them because of the bit bucket thing. It's somewhere to put them. And then it's only afterwards, or if somebody asks me to read them out, I find I get all this emotion that I didn't know was there. And it's so, for me, they've been, in many ways, they're like the closest in stuff. They're the things that my heart says to me when I don't realize that I've got it to say. But how I got there is, first, I wrote my journey. I explored it in words that weren't too prescriptive, possibly because I was in a prescriptive environment. And I wanted to be looser. And as soon as you call yourself a poet, you're allowed more freedom in how you express. And so for me, that really mattered, because I don't think I work in a very linear way. I work in this flowy, roundabout, twisty kind of a thing. And so that's the biggest thing for me, is they showed me my journey, what I was exploring, how like these bizarre strands, a bit like your life. I've got this corporate IT career in the financial sector where your job was mostly to be screamed at and fix problems before anybody knew they happened. And then the very physical massage and Pilates, and then into coaching, and then into sort of the non-dual fields. And so suddenly seeing how everything came together and nothing's wasted, and that this conversation is in some ways the same conversation I was having with a very, I can't even think of the right word, a very boss who didn't understand his own budget. It's the same conversation. And I think when you see that, it's like, first of all, I've got that beautiful freedom that I have never had any temptation to tell anybody, follow my path, because I would never recommend 14 years in corporate IT and consulting to anybody unless they really, really, really are a sucker for punishment. And partly, so that gives me a lot of freedom, that I know my path is not somebody else's, which gives me this huge freedom to allow somebody else their path.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the stories, everybody hears something different, and everybody hears, even me, when I go back to them now, I hear something different, and I hear something I was showing myself, and it changes and it evolves. And so they're not like written deliberately as like to pull on heartstrings, but they do because of that universal perspective, I guess.
Yeah, so lovely, so lovely. And what has there been any specific experiences that have led you to what you write about to
I think there's a theme, and the theme is I was the kid who took everything to pieces to find out how it worked.
right.
Even the things that other people didn't think could be taken to pieces, I could.
Mm-hmm.
And the theme for me has always been to not believe something just because I was told it. Now, I'm as open to manipulation or seduction as anybody if somebody gets the right triggers. But in terms of a more spiritual teaching, and especially the non-dual one, I could have a 3-week long argument about 2 words until it really sat with me that this is the case. And I think I've been really lucky, because from very early on in that, or probably even before an explicit non-dual exploration, I used to get these sort of images, and the image sort of showed me my next step. And I had this image from very early on of a river, and of a river that was really hard to cross, and how if somebody came from the other side and kind of held out their hands and said, here's your stepping stone, don't stop, but here's your stepping stone, that it became a lot easier. But it also had that image of turning back round and saying, oh, there's no river. There was never a challenging crossing, but it really appreciating and respecting that from the initial side, that's what it looked like. And then I heard Amy Chen Mills telling a Sid Banks story that she remembered from childhood, I think. And it was about somebody hearing a party or joy and celebration on the other side of a hedge, and getting a ladder, like climbing the ladder to get to a point where they could see. But as they climbed and climbed and climbed and kept climbing, they came to that realization that there wasn't a barrier and there wasn't a ladder, but what had changed was their perspective.
Mm. Oh, so beautiful. And there's a lot of people now who follow you on social media and who listen to your words, who are buying your beautiful book of poetries. And what do you tend to tell people, would you say, if someone comes to you very troubled and looking for a way through to experience more peace, how do you work with people, or what would you tell them?
If they're very troubled, I try to make them laugh a little bit, and I point them to proper medical help and local support, and learning to find the things that they do love, even if it's just a hot shower or a bowl of ice cream. So when somebody is really troubled, I want to do what I can to activate good support networks, and I never rule anything out. So I would want them to be getting medical help if that was appropriate. If they're a bit at a loss, or a bit at a dead end, or a bit stuck, we might begin with the really practical things: emotions, beliefs, perspective, knowing what I want, that kind of thing. But as we move more into the non-dual teaching, my first and most important things are, this is who you are. So nobody can impose that on you. Even if you're in the most horrible situation, this is who you are. And the reasons for that, as we all know, the the freedom, the peace and the love that come with that. And then I always talk that this isn't about spirituality rather than science. It is science. It's the best science. It's the introspection or self-reflection, which we might call direct experience. And direct experience being only what we can know without anybody else telling us. And logic, which gets missed out a lot, but as a computer programmer, logic is really important, because logic takes those deep felt, often unworded things into something that's possible for us to understand mentally. And then experience or experimentation, where we try it out. And I think that if people are given the tools, they might explore alongside somebody like you or me or any of the other teachers around us, but they will be doing it knowing that, like, the power's in their hands. In terms of this can't be imposed or taken away or even given. The gift we've got is to open doors and to show possibilities. And that's a responsibility as well as a gift. So yeah, I always come back to it. This is about you, and it's a hell of a lot simpler than you probably think.
So gorgeous. And when you say this is what you are, could you say that in your words? What is that?
It's going to change at different stages for people, and that's why the stepping stone metaphor always helped me, because most of us begin this journey very caught up in an idea of self that is not true, to the extent that we may have a stepping stone that says there is no self. For me, that is still a stepping stone, but it may be a vital stepping stone in order to dismantle the stories and the limitations and the beliefs and the grudges and the everything that we've taken on. And that dismantling or deconditioning is a vital part of it. The seeing through the stories, all of them. There's always a story, but seeing through all of them as story is kind of helpful. And then beyond that, the next stepping stone is going to be kind of bringing it all back together a little bit, so that we don't leave anything out, because it can be very easy to accidentally perpetuate a different sort of separation. So first of all, we say, okay, well, you're not separate from life, the universe, God, consciousness, awareness, whatever you want to call it. But then that can quite often leave everything else sort of scattered around like a messy room. And it's like, well, yeah, but what are we going to do with all those thoughts that you've happily declared aren't you? What are you going to do with all those emotions that you're popping over here? I remember one client turned up and they said, I know I'm not my body. And a little voice in the back of my head said, the very first thing we're going to do is put you back in your body. Because the body is no limitation or restriction. And I think that the more we move to this, through those steps, as much as we need them, into different stances, observer stance or no self stance, we come to this point where every conversation is a non-dual conversation. The world is the same deep spiritual truth that we're talking about, and there's no gaps, there's no differences. And that enables us, rather than needing to go off and live in some religious institution, it enables us to live like engaged, fulfilling lives without a contradiction.
So great. Gives me butterflies listening to you say it. It's so great. I love the way you articulate it. Really love it, Sarah. It's so real and practical, and no denial in it. It's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah. And so, for somebody like you, like, you wouldn't want to not have a special relationship with your own children.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't want to think that you'd forgotten or mistaken or confused because you were telling your daughter about, you were laying down the law and saying, I'm really sorry, but right here and now, I am your mum and you are not doing that.
Yeah.
That's the same conversation.
Yeah.
And that whole concept of not being afraid of our experience, over the last couple of weeks, I've been quite sad and hurt and angry. And a lot of people have tried to fix that. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I am sad and I am hurt and I am angry. And they are appropriate for me for this situation. So yeah, offer me love and support, hold space for me. Let me have a wee rant. But don't try to fix those feelings, because every time we try to fix somebody else's feelings, we're setting them up for failure.
Yeah. 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 So true. Oh, we need these words, Sarah. We need them. They're so great to hear. Thank you, lovely. So maybe that's the perfect place to hear your writing. Would that be okay?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm going to be looking at the words, not your smiley face, but I
Yes.
will come back to you after.
Yes.
And I'll do my best not to stumble too much.
Wow.
I think I called this one The River in the end. Her reverie was broken by her waders being dropped in her lap. She knew it was time, but still she made her protest. Papa, can't Egbert go today? He's your firstborn, and it is his calling. Silently, Papa turned to look out of the window, and her gaze followed his, to where Egbert was chasing butterflies with a sword. Rosa sighed, point made, another perfect cup of tea destined to go cold. As soon as she saw the river, her mood lifted, like it always did. There were several journeyers floundering, more pacing on the opposite bank, and just a few dazed souls sitting on the near side. Rosa's triage instincts kicked in. The easy first step was to gather into the shelter those journeyers who had already made the crossing and ask the most able of them to hand out blankets and make hot drinks. She could talk to them later. Papa, today, like every day, was already in the middle of the river, gently coaxing the flounderers to their feet, pointing them to the shelter, encouraging them to keep moving. Of course, there were some who were petrified. They'd gone too far to ever return, but had no idea what came next. Papa could deal with that. He'd once sat there for 3 days with someone in distress, waiting quietly till they asked him the way. She struggled into her waders. They weren't necessary from this bank. Standing here, the river was clearly a gentle, bubbling stream. But once she crossed to the far side, she'd just be one of the journeyers, searching for the way across a raging torrent. The waders were Papa's concession. She'd made this journey so many times, at least she'd stay dry. Once on the far bank, she moved purposefully among the pacers. Within moments, she couldn't remember why. All she knew was this impossible river blocking the way. She looked up and caught the spark in a man's eye. A sense of adventure stirred. Should we try? They turned hand in hand and headed straight for the river. The directness of their movement caused a ripple through the crowd. Some called out, saying it was dangerous or futile, or that risks of injury were too high. One or two even suggested they were irresponsible when there was still work to be done on this bank. Nothing deterred her. She categorically knew the route across. Not all of it at once, but each next step as it was required. He held on tight and followed, never more than half a pace behind, never slowing her down. Clambering the bank, she could hear Papa teasing her that this was her fastest crossing yet. She blinked and remembered. The journeyer was laughing and crying, still holding her hand, expressing gratitude beyond measure. Here's what she told him. I cannot help anyone who isn't ready. It's the spark in your eye that lit the way.
Oh, darling. I'm going to put us in the gallery. Oh, my love. It's so beautiful.
And I do think anybody teaching this work, that's our gift, to remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. So lovely. It's so true to how you are. So yeah, it's just beautiful. Thank you, my love.
Thank you.
Thanks, darling. So I think we have to end it now, don't we? Because it's, yeah, we'll end with those beautiful words still being in the air. And thank you, my darling, so much for everything that you do.
And you.
Yeah. See you soon, love.